Welcome to yet another episode of Ain't Got Time for That, where we speak about all things across the worlds of business, of personal life, of challenges, and all of those great things that we really want to learn, we really want to do. But we generally say, ain't got time for that. I'm Zeke Condon. I'm a product manager and product entrepreneur.
I'm Ilan, program manager, delivery lead, thinker, and a whole host of other things.
Yeah, and just a good bloke. Just seriously a good bloke. All right, so today, as promised, I'm going to put Ilan on the spot this week and ask Ilan a difficult question. And my difficult question to you is put you on the spot is, Ilan, what have been the benefits or disadvantages of having gotten an MBA so early in life and so early in your career? Unfold that.
Good question. Good question indeed. I think I'll caveat my answer by saying I don't think any pursuit of knowledge is ever going to be too early. And I think that acquiring knowledge at different points in your life will lead to different paths. And similarly with doing an MBA early in life, it opened different avenues to me. It broadened my horizons. Had I done it later in life, I have no doubt that other avenues and other opportunities would have opened up then. In terms of some of the benefits that I got from it, I think, at least in my experience, when you go into an undergrad degree, you're still quite young, you're still trying to feel out where you fit into the world, where your interests are, and you don't necessarily pursue everything equally. So there's a lot of subjects and a lot of topics that later in life, you actually develop a bit more of an appetite for, that you don't necessarily spend the time at an undergrad when it's available to you. Exploring. So coming back and doing the MBA gave me that opportunity to revisit certain things, explore a couple of pet projects of mine, and also just like give me a couple of extra threads to pull. I think one of the things that I loved about the MBA is it's a structured environment. You presented with a list of different topics, a list of different areas that you can think about, you can spend time exploring, and just pulling at threads, and kind of seeing where that leads to. And I don't think that can ever be too early.
So I'm hearing a lot of personal benefit to it. Has there been career benefits? If so, what are they?
I think in today's world, it's very difficult to isolate personal and professional. I think that the package that you bring to both worlds is very interrelated. So the way that you think, the way that you problem solve, the curiosity that you demonstrate are very interlinked. And I think that me talking about it from a personal standpoint is not specific to just the world outside of my 9-to-5 job. I think that the benefits were seen there as well. It definitely opened up doors to me. It opened up promotions to me. And it also just opened up other conversations, more strategic conversations at work that potentially were always there. But I knew how to actually position myself for them and be able to partake in them and actually help add value to the organization.
So you said it, so you pricked on an interesting thing there around the relationship between personal and professional life these days. The one thing you hooked them together with was around the thinking. Can you tell me, what was Ilan's thinking before and what was Ilan's thinking and thought patterns after? What are some of the takeaways you got from how you thought, changes?
It's difficult because I don't know if you can necessarily, like, there's not a light switch moment that happens where suddenly your thinking just evolves, and one day it's structured one way and one day it's structured another. But I think that at least for me, it put a little bit more academic rigor around the way that I approach problems, a bit more structure to the way that I gather information. But in terms of problem solving, my undergrad was in business and information technology. So obviously spent quite a bit of time in the software space. And I think the focus on maths, the focus on software engineering was critical to me in developing the thought processes and in methodology to solve different problems. So I think it's not necessarily a case that there was a full shift in the way that I approach things, but more further tools in the toolkit.
Yep. So rigor and structure, are they tools? I mean, let's throw a scenario out here. So I'm living in the world of entrepreneurship for the most part at the moment, and rigor and structure, whilst I have a great appreciation for that, I can also see that it lands to the detriment of a lot of people that I work with, where they do try to put too much rigor and too much structure. So they focus on the process and not the principles. Do you think that the MBA structure, it was only a few years ago, so it hasn't much changed. Is it out of tune with the principles that we should be applying today, or is it, are they adapting?
Well, when you say rigor and structure, when you take something like design thinking, there's structure to that. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not fit for purpose in an entrepreneurial world. I think once again, it's another tool in your toolkit, and it's an approach that can be used at the right time. So I think similarly with an MBA, yes, there's obviously changes to the fabric of the society that we live in. In the technology world, there's obviously blockchain emerging, there's artificial intelligence emerging. I mean, arguably it's been around for 20 years. We just didn't have the computer power to support it, but I won't digress further. I think to those topics, could we be spending a bit more time exploring them? Absolutely. But underneath it all, the conversations that we were having around how do you make sure that an organization operates in a slightly more lean manner? What are some of the frameworks you can look at when you want to do mergers and acquisitions? How do you understand the financial health of the business? I don't know if that necessarily changes, but I think we're talking foundation. You're not going to go into an MBA and expect to specialize.
Yep. So I guess what you're saying then is it's not that you learnt the rigor and structure. You actually learnt an appreciation for the conceptual rigor and structure. And you just touched on the thing I was going to say next is around like those mental thinking frameworks, the different ways to cut and slice and dice information, but then putting an appreciation of rigor and structure around that. Would that summarize kind of some of your thinking changes during your MBA?
Oh, I think it definitely helped aid it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Cool. Is there any other disadvantages that you might have you've seen that the things you learned, the principles you got, the networks, the communications, the whole experience that you would say don't work that well out in the real world, or that if you could go back and change the way that you interacted with the course, is there anything that you can pick out there?
I think you need to be very clear with the reasons that you're going into doing it, the MBA. And I think personally for me, there's no regrets,
Yep.
but I think that there would definitely be others that would look to embark on an MBA journey with different criteria, and then doing an MBA potentially at an early age, or doing an MBA at certain business schools potentially wouldn't necessarily be fit for their purposes. So one of the things that I mean with that is there are certain schools that offer 1 year immersive MBAs, where you spend a little bit more time staying on campus, and it focuses a little bit more on the network that you build. And when you're looking at doing that, then you need to be thinking about the student base that the university attracts. So
I was sort of saying, like, think more about when you're looking at postgrad ed, not so much about just what you learn, but the network. I think the why, why you want to learn concepts, things, because I think that's something that a lot of people can overlook, and I think personally I've overlooked, where I've done my research into looking at postgrads, and I'm like looking at the information I want to acquire as the key driver in the decision to pursue looking at it. But then by the time push comes to shove and I look at the life factors around it, I then back out. So you're saying, so to look more holistically at why you want to get it. Yeah. Do you think there's enough, how do you get to, what was your why? Why did you go to an MBA?
I'm obsessively curious, and I think that it gave me another avenue to go and explore that curiosity. I knew that it was that further knowledge acquisition was always going to be on my roadmap. And for me, I didn't see a reason to delay that.
But why an MBA? Like, why, why not the wide world web or the experiences? Why did Ilan choose an MBA?
I think the general aspect really attracted me. I wasn't ready to go and pursue a specific master's in a specific topic. Irony is that might be on the radar at some point in the future, but probably more of a conversation for another day. But doing an MBA gave you a broad enough reach that could still scratch that itch, but done so in a way that I knew that there would be guaranteed benefit as well.
So you were kind of mindful enough to know that you were super inquisitive, but you were also mindful enough of your own personality traits that you're a generalist, that it made it an easier choice to choose an MBA across a general category that was going to give you so much information that was going to satiate that need. There you go. Heard it right here. Ilan, the inquisitive generalist. So I have one more question, which is, what are some of the tricks and tips that you could give to, say, let's go with two mindsets here. Tricks and tips that you could give to somebody who's setting out into an entrepreneurial career, either they're young, old, wherever, versus somebody who's setting out into a professional career. Number one or number two, number three insights that you would give to either one of those that you learnt as part of the MBA structure, program, lessons, network, etc. Entrepreneur first.
I think for me, there's going to be a lot of overlap between the two. I think first and foremost is understand your why. And then second is actually understand your strengths and your weaknesses, because an MBA is an avenue you can explore. It's a stream. It's not necessarily going to be fit for purpose for everyone. And whether it's an entrepreneur, whether it's a upcoming professional, with it, even if it's a more seasoned professional, if the topics that are being covered are not where you need to be investing your time, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be right for you.
I kind of get the feeling that with most postgrad education, there's you kind of have to have a grasp of the concepts that you're going to learn, and it's more about embedding the information you already know, as opposed to it being a, wow, I never would have known this concept existed until I started this lesson, right? And that's the to what you're saying is like knowing your why and knowing your, you know, your strengths and your weaknesses before you go into it. It's kind of tied into kind of knowing conceptually what it is you're going to learn, is tied to that. How do you get to that?
And that's why it's so different to doing an undergrad degree, because I think you're very green when you go into an undergrad degree, and you're spending a lot of the time just trying to, if you use like the analogy of the tree, you're still trying to build that structure around it. Now you're looking more at the branches and the leaves that go off it.
And in your case, just growing the trunk even wider, hey? The generalist lens to it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So any next tip, any quick tips, tricks and tips that you can give to anyone that's starting out in, say, a professional career that you learn?
I think don't go there with the belief that the learning finishes there. It's a journey. And I think that's why kind of understanding where you are on that journey is so critical, because when you see that it's a lifetime endeavor, then you realize that the time that you commit to it, whether it's early or later, probably doesn't matter too much.
Love it. So books for the day. I think we've already mentioned one without even meaning to mention it. Find Your Why by Simon Sinek. If you're thinking about getting into postgrad study or thinking about studying in any way, shape, or form, if you haven't done some sort of self-discovery and understanding your own inner demons / inner angels, start with why. And
there's another great one as well, is How Would You Measure Your Life? By Clayton Christensen.
I don't know this one. How to Measure Your Life. All right. I'm gonna, what's that one? Is that sort of about mindfulness and?
I think it's a lot of people kind of go through life and don't necessarily take a conscious path to the decisions that they're making and the time that they're spending on things. And it talks a lot about developing strategies, whether it's explicit or whether it's more an emergent strategy. And one of the big things that kind of sunk in with me is if you look at what your week looks like, you've already worked out where your interests are, where your time is should be spent in the future. And then it's a case of refining that.
I love it. I love it. That seems really practical as well. I think a lot of people nowadays working from home, there's a lot more kind of in the calendar, blocked out digital kind of footprints that you can reflect back on too. So that's a cool one. I like it. Okay, well, thank you very much, listeners. Today we got into the head of Ilan, the generalist who just keeps getting more and more wider trunk of generality. One day he will jump into something, and I'm going to push him that way. Maybe you'll become a specialist at being a generalist. I don't know. Thank you very much for listening. Guys, this is episode number 4. So if you're listening to this one fresh, check out last week's one on vulnerability and human-centered design. Week before that, I can't remember what it was, but it was even better. So go on through the playlist, have a listen, and hope to hear from you again next week, where we will be interviewing a fantastic person talking about how to lead organizational change without changing the organizational structure. I'm Zeke Condon.
I'm Ilan. Looking forward to it. We'll
Until
chat to
next
you all
week.
next week.
Thanks,
Cheers.
mate.